Hey everyone, we are back for another special of Anna and Michael Zuber talking about real estate investing. And we're going to do something a little different this time. We spent a lot of time telling our stories, talking about new investors. We're going to take a different tack. We're going to say, hey, what about the folks that have, two, three, four properties? They're kind of sitting there, cash flows, it's it's something but yet not interesting. What does that feel like? When do you make that leap to bigger things and all of that? So let's welcome Anna to the show and get this conversation started. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How about you, Michael?
I'm doing very well. This is a conversation I've known I wanted to have with you for a while because I think there are three phases. There's building the foundation, which is kind of 5 to 8 years, no matter how much money you have or where you're starting. There's the next phase, kind of step two. How do you grow? How do you leverage? How do you recycle capital? And then there's step three. Okay, you're out of the rat race. What do you want to do then? I just think so many people don't appreciate the importance and the length of time involved in building the foundation. So I thought we'd talk about that today.
Absolutely. So important, Michael, because in a world of, Facebook gurus that come out and tell you, jump in this thing and it's going to happen in no time flat. The reality is, unless you already have a lot of money, it's pretty hard to do that. And there's no shortcuts to having long-term success in real estate. So the more you learn as you build that foundation,
Mhm.
the value of time is something that we don't appreciate in our want it fast society. But the time that it takes to really get proficient and be able to make wise, ongoing, investment decisions is longer than what most people bank for. And it's something important to talk about the realities of.
Yeah, we are such in a, I don't know, get rich quick, want it today mindset. It's what I've really come to realize is in this, what I now call the 40-40 mindset, right? Work 40 hours a week for 40 years, that kind of mindset. Negative consequences come fast, right? You spend too much money, you take on too much debt, you eat the wrong kind of food, you don't exercise, whatever it is. Negative consequences are fast, but the positive, invest in yourself, save money. The positive stuff takes time, and real estate investing is no exception.
Total truth bomb.
Yeah,
Really good.
awesome. I'm on to something.
You
Woohoo!
are.
That's cool. Because
Listen, we all wish it wasn't that way, but
yeah,
that's just the reality of life is good things come to those who are patient and persistent. And it's real easy to do things the wrong way and then regret it and lose it very quickly.
yeah. I mean, I had two conversations, as we said before we opened the show, just yesterday. One gentleman, I think he's into his 14th or 15th month, so he just went past year one. He had a little bit of capital to start, so I think he's on his fifth property, and they all cash flow and they're doing well, and he has a good W-2, so he's fine. But he's like, man, I can't live on that. I'm like, no kidding. This is your phase one is, 5 to 8 years. You got to build a big foundation because what phase two is leverage, or what I call
Mm.
recycling capital. And
Yes.
unless appreciation is just gangbusters and frankly unhealthy, like it was in 05, 06, it takes time to have, just 3% appreciation and some mortgage pay down and rent increases. So you can go back and either do a cash out refi, right? Reposition debt and reuse that capital in your first foundation next. Or as we did in our step two was we 1031 to bigger stuff because it made financial sense. And he's like, okay, I get it. But this one rental at a time thing, it's slow. I'm like, you're not listening. I'm here to tell you it's 5 to 8 years for everybody. Stop it. Just 5 to 8 years. Just tell yourself that. And he didn't like that, but it's the truth.
Yeah. And I think part of the reason for that, Michael, just as we kind of alluded to, is you do occasionally get somebody that is, very young, that meets the right person that can help them jumpstart into, it looks like they're just doing, $1 million deals in multifamily, and they're, a teeny tiny sliver of the
Yeah.
owner. Because timing can make people that don't really know what they're doing look really good.
Yeah. Amen.
Sometimes if they get lucky. But for most of us that are not just in the right place at the right time to meet the right connection that has a bunch of cash, or that we already have our own cash, for most of us, we're grinding it away. and doing it slow and methodically and trying to build it wisely. And it takes some time, but it's very achievable. And just be real careful about any of those that promise you, sky is the limit. This is only going to take you a year and you're going to be a millionaire, because it's very, very, very rare. It's kind of like multi-level marketing. Yes, you've got a few at the very top who are doing really well, but 80-90%, if you read their disclosures, are spending more in product than they're
Hmm.
actually making. And so there's
Yeah.
always more than meets the eye. And
Hmm.
part of why I love, talking to you and the show that we have is that it's real. It's
Yeah.
the reality of, what to expect. And I think that gives people some patience and perspective when they realize, okay, this is how it really is. Then they don't feel the pressure and the disappointment when they're not the, one in a million that make it big real fast with very little time.
Yeah. Again, we're both talking about conservatively invest, takes a long time, be consistent. Yes, somebody will win the lottery. I'm here to tell you it's probably not you.
I wish.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know
Yeah.
what to say. I wish I was wrong. But anyways, why don't we just remind people of what your phase one looked like? You may not think of it that way, but when you were out just starting, you got your first one, your second one. I'm assuming your journey was somewhat like mine. You felt like you sort of saw that step up, but that first phase was, I'm sure, years for you. What do you remember what that kind of looked like?
It was, yes. When I bought my first rental properties, I really bought them because we were kind of starting over with a new business in my area. And I didn't know how long my W-2 was going to last, because I was starting like a work from home
Right.
trial basis thing.
I
So
remember.
we bought a 4-unit building that we lived in within a year of moving here. We bought a mixed use commercial building that my husband opened his chiropractic business in. And then right when the market crashed in '08, we did all of this in '07, '08, right before the crash. Right before it did crash, I basically bought another 4-unit by borrowing from my 401k, which was
Oh.
basically obliterated in a couple of weeks. So I had those 12 units within about a year and a half. And, I was in that googly eye phase that, wow, I can start buying properties, and, lending's flowing really easily. And I can't believe I'm getting these loans. And then boom, the market crashed.
Yeah.
And it just halted me. I couldn't get loans any longer. My company, I thought, was going under. Husband's startup business started up at the wrong time with debt. And we were really kind of, hamstrung to be able to grow, because we just didn't have the capital it took. And so
Mhm.
although my story and the timing, may be unique, it's not unlike what I'm seeing today, where
Yeah.
it could very well happen again.
Yeah.
And so without a lot of cash and capital, unforeseen things can happen that can make it become slower than what you think it should. And
Mhm.
ultimately, no matter when you're investing, most people run out of capital pretty quickly. So you buy a couple and then you're out of cash. And then
Yeah.
what do you do? You know? So it takes longer to get creative and figure out how to keep buying,
Mhm.
because appreciation, like you said, especially in singles and duplexes, it could take years to grow that equity.
Mhm.
And in our case, with 4-unit buildings, we were able to grow the equity a little more quickly. But then we couldn't borrow from it because the lending environment tightened up so much that
Yeah.
no banks would give us equity loans. So
Yeah.
it was a very slow process after the first year and a half, when I thought I was going gangbusters.
Yeah, similar story, right? We started in '03. I had no expectations of financial freedom. I just knew if I got one a year that my future would be better than anything in my family had ever seen. That's all I had ever thought. I thought I would
Yes.
work till I was 65. I thought if I had 4 or 5, I'd be set, right? Not set like retire in my 40s, but set when I'm 65, because they'd be free and clear. I
Right.
could refi them whatever I wanted. And then what happened is, so we had 40K that we did $20,000 down on the first, which was 20%. What did we know? Then we did 80, 10, 10. So we got into 2 more. Then the 40 grand's gone, right? It's like I got
Yeah.
nothing left.
Right.
So we happened to get lucky at timing, right? So '03, '04, '05, money's gone. Appreciation, like I said, was unhealthy. So we did a cash out refi on our first property because we had a bunch of equity there. And I created my first alligator. I'm like, why the hell would a bank give me a loan and make it negative cash flow? What is this bank thinking? Nope, they didn't care. It just loaded me up, right? And then, the next year we refied, and then, we were stuck at 8 units because they didn't make sense, and I couldn't buy anything else, and I didn't have any money.
Right.
So yeah, our leap was the realization that you could do a 1031 exchange, which I knew nothing about when I started, and move
Yeah.
equity, again, recycle capital, which I think is the key to step 2, into bigger things. But that was after 6 years, and frankly, 6 years of ridiculous appreciation. That's why I like to say it's really 5 to 8 years.
Yeah.
I got lucky both in the timing, but also got lucky to get out, because if I was a year late, I'd still be having 8 houses. Right? It was
Right.
that bad. So
Right.
yeah, so it takes time for everyone. That's really the point of this.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So let's
And,
just
and
go ahead.
even though it takes time, though, like you mentioned, and I mentioned too, I don't want the listeners to miss this, is, when you buy something, you want to, really work on buying something and fixing it up, not
Hmm.
just sticking a tenant in there
Yeah.
or, letting it look like it does, but buy something that has some value play where you can go in and improve the property, raise the rents, and thereby raise the value. And when you do that and you do a value play, at least you can kind of force that equity value, or force the appreciation is what we use in the commercial
Hmm.
world terms. But when you're buying something that's a little rougher, you have much quicker potential to raise the value and create that upside, so that
Hmm.
you then can take that equity and continue to invest, versus buying something that's really turnkey, that doesn't have a lot of
Yeah.
upside, that you're just going to have to wait years and years and years to really grow the value of that asset.
Yeah. Totally agree. Did you ever get an opportunity to refi or reposition equity from those first 12 units, either via sale, an exchange, or refi?
Took me 5 years, Michael, before the banks would let me cash out the equity. And you learn what you didn't know as you go on, and hindsight's 2020, and
Yeah.
thankfully we can learn valuable lessons. I wasn't creative or persistent enough. I went to a couple local banks that were like, nope, can't do
Nope.
it. You work
Yeah.
for AIG, we're tightening our lending standards, your husband has too much debt. the,
Hmm.
the banks basically would not let me borrow from the equity, even knowing I wanted to just use it to buy more property, because they viewed real estate investors as risky.
Oh,
So where I went in as a former banker and financial advisor, and went into my banks and said, listen, I know there are people that are, crazy real estate investors who have lost everything. But here's my business plan, and here's why buying cash flowing rental properties with low leverage debt is a wise thing to do, that makes me less risky to you, because I have more cash flow than if I'm just sitting here like this.
yeah.
But yet their boards didn't want to hear it,
Yeah.
So they were really tight on real estate investors. And I know several regional banks who actually pulled real estate investors' equity lines of credit,
Oh,
because
yeah.
they
I
just
was one.
viewed
Yeah.
investors, yeah, as risky. And so the lending environment for 5 years, they said no. And it wasn't until I got creative and bought a few more 4-unit buildings with owner financing,
There you go.
that I had enough equity in buildings at that point that I could say, listen, it's been 5 years. I am growing. I have 12 more units since I last talked to you. And I'm going to find a bank to either, refinance your loans into something else, so
Uh-huh.
that they're in first position, so that
Yep.
I can then buy more. Or I'm coming to you to give you an opportunity for my business to give me a second mortgage or a line of credit. And I'm willing to commit to you that the only thing I'm going to buy with it is another rental property. And they finally said yes. So it
Yeah.
took a long time. But once they said yes, and I knew I could borrow from my equity, then I could start that scaling and leveraging the equity for my buildings. And that's really when I was able to really start growing methodically and much more quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. There's something else you said there that people, if you've only been in the game 5 years, you do not appreciate what Anna just said. Banks turned off lending to real estate investors. I mean, like flat out. So we,
Yeah,
just as an example, we had 80 units at the time, all commercial, plenty of cash flow, 6-figure jobs, 7-figure net worth, 800 credit scores, and they laughed me out of the banks.
crazy.
Just, it was nuts. So yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't get a bank loan. I just got one in late 18 was the first bank loan. Yeah, I didn't get a residential bank loan for 6 or 7 years. It was just
It's
off.
crazy. And it took them a lot of time. And, people don't realize that not only because the last crash was fairly real estate
Oh,
related,
for sure.
yes, there were other issues, at play. But because of real estate being hit so hard in certain areas, all of the regulations that changed that really required
Yeah.
the banks to change up their investment portfolio and the type of risk and liabilities they had on their books really
Hmm.
put additional pressure on the banks. Not only were they trying to protect anyone else from falling, but they had to really get much more conservative in order to, stay in business and fall in line with regulators. And so they're these kind of things you never foresee. You never
Yeah.
think they're going to happen. And it's hard to plan for it. So, that's where we talk about sometimes there's a little bit of luck in timing and sometimes there's a little bit of bad luck in timing.
Yeah.
So the more you prepare yourself for having to play the long game through many market cycles, different financial things that are outside of your control,
Hmm.
and the more you can get creative to learn how to buy properties with or without the bank, the better you'll do more quickly.
I couldn't have said it better. And the other thing I want to make sure when we talk about this phase one and the leap to phase two is it is entirely okay if you just want to stay in phase one, right? If you just want to get
Hmm.
4 or 5 rentals, that's your long-term plan. Awesome. We both support that entirely. Just know who you are and know what you want. You don't have to go to phase two, right? Like if you just want to get to 4, like I talk about, thumbs up, go for it, So
Yeah.
I don't
This
want to make,
this goes to, a very important point that there is no one right way to make money in real estate.
yep,
For some people it's multifamily only. For some it's single family only.
yep,
For some it's self-storage, forget tenants altogether.
yeah,
You're going to have different people say that this is the only thing that you should buy and the only thing that makes sense. And the reality is that your investment decisions are very, very personal,
yes,
and your family and your lifestyle and your economic needs and the amount of time you have available, the skill set that you have, all have a completely different impact on what's the best way for you to
hmm,
pursue real estate, whether it's active or passive, whether you go for singles or multis, and your geography, like we
yeah,
talked about before. If you're in California and you want to flip uh, to keep for a rental a single family house, you better have at least 100 grand if you can even find something for half a million.
yeah,
You know,
exactly,
in
yeah,
Pennsylvania or in Texas, you can find properties a whole lot cheaper.
yep,
Your labor costs might be more in certain areas than others. Your taxes may or may not be, but there's so many things that go into what the right type of investment is for you. And some people really love their job and they're not trying to,
yeah,
replace their income. They just want a little extra passive income or something that in 20 years will pay for their kids' schooling, which is kind of what we thought, initially when we got into this too, before we
yeah,
decided to really do it full time. So, lots of things go into what's right for you, and just create a plan that works for you to build up
absolutely.
that passive income in whichever way makes the most sense for you. And keep doing it as you decide that you want to do it.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better. I mean, this is such an individual choice. You have so many options. You can go big, you can go small, you can go. I mean, it is really you need to sit down with yourself, your significant other, your family, and ask what you want out of it. Is it just what I thought? Hey, I want to have 4 houses free and clear when I'm 65. That's a wonderful goal. Go do that. That's totally okay. Or if you
Right.
want financial freedom, go for that. Just know that the time difference there. So I think
Yeah,
that's
for sure.
wonderful. So let's talk about the jump from phase two, which I call recycling capital, which is fun and exciting, and you're kind of in the game and you're really seeing the fruits of your labor. The end of phase two for me is when you have financial freedom and you have options, right? You can punch out. You don't have to, but you can.
Hmm.
Um, and this is something you've been celebrating now for the better part of 6 or 7 months. So what do you really see as that leap to that next phase in real estate investing?
I think for me, it was make sure that before I retired from my W 2 and
Mhm.
really could be in control of my time and make choices about what I did with my day, I knew that not only did I need to replace my W 2 income, but replace enough to pay for, health care out of pocket, for
Yeah,
example.
that's not
And
cheap.
no, and I have 4 kids that are 8
Oh my.
to 16. So,
Yeah.
we've got vehicles and colleges coming in our future. And, I was ready financially in terms of the amount of money I had coming in passively 4 years into my phase two growth.
Yeah.
But I knew, what am I then going to do
Yeah.
to make sure I can pay for these other things that are important, like healthcare and kids' sports and, college and cars. And so, the other thing that I did to kind of hold off that phase three was I knew I needed to pay off all the debt that I had other than mortgages. That was
Hmm.
important to me.
Yeah.
And I did keep an equity line of credit for investing open, but it was important to me to pay down all that debt,
Hmm.
save a year's worth of expenses, of personal expenses, and 6 months of expenses on all of my rental properties. And I
Yeah.
did that before I went to phase three for a couple of reasons. So one is I wanted to remain as bankable as possible
Ah,
after
yes.
not having a W-2. Because as we talked about, when banks are already tightening, if you're a full-time real estate investor and you don't have a job or something to fall back on, they look at you a little more risky. But if
Hmm.
I can say, listen, I've been wise enough to save 6 months expenses so that even if my rents went down and I lost all of my tenants, I could survive and pay you for 6 months, and my rental, and my personal expenses. I knew that that would be powerful to banks, especially regional banks that I already had a relationship with.
Hmm.
And it would set me up so that even if I retired right before a major recession, which I kind of think we're heading
Yeah.
for, um, we would be okay if those things did happen.
Yeah.
So I think so many people are so ready to clock out of their W-2,
Yeah.
put it behind them, that they don't really think about what are the consequences of doing that and how can I continue to scale my real estate beyond just meeting my minimum needs, but
Yeah.
so that I can continue to, pay for things for my children and create legacy wealth over time.
Yeah, I wish I was the planner you were. I had always planned to be done of phase two or start my phase three at 50. Why 50? It's a round number. Don't ask me. But I loved my job. I'd have done my job, my W-2 job for free. That's how much I enjoyed it. But as things go, reorganizations in a sales career change all the time. And I was placed with an individual that I didn't have any respect for and I thought was a rotten human being. And I'm
Mm,
like, no, this isn't going to work. And it basically came down to a 30-minute conversation, you or me. I'm like, well, I don't need to be here. So see you later. I
yeah.
text my wife walking back to my desk, honey, I just quit. Like, we're done. Like, this is over. She's like, all right, come home. I'm like, okay. So I didn't know what
Wow.
I was going to do. I mean, it just came out of nowhere, sort of a
But
weird
the
day.
rentals bought you the freedom that you
Oh,
you had the ability to walk away when you needed to walk away.
yeah. For the last couple of years, we had banked most of my income unless we were buying a fixer upper. Yeah. So we didn't
Yeah.
need my income. And again, I'd have done it for free. I loved it that much. But yeah, I still remember that. I remember sitting in there looking at him going, you don't like me and I don't like you. Uh, I'm out of here. We're done.
Uh,
It was fun.
yeah, I had wanted my exit for my W-2 for 16 years. So when we talk about the long game,
Yeah.
it took me 16 years to figure out how to make money outside of a W-2 enough that I could support our family and raise our kids. And so, it took me 4 years to think, oh, the way out is to be an entrepreneur and start a business.
Yeah.
And then it took me 2 years to realize, whoa, a W-2 is not secure and neither is having your own business,
Yeah.
and the economy is crazy. So what is my last option? And it's real estate. Let's
There you
build
go.
this thing.
Yeah.
And then it took me 5 years to be able to start executing that plan,
Yep.
and then 5 years to actually completely execute the plan when lending was no longer an option. So,
Yeah.
it's not that I really so much planned so well, but I just took what, the world gave me and
Yeah.
said, I've
Kept
got
moving.
to create a plan or nothing is going to change. And so this was my way of knowing I can have some control
Yeah.
to, get as close to where I need to be so that when I was able to walk away, I could do it,
Yeah.
on my terms.
That's awesome. So guys, this is key, right? There's really three phases we've talked about real estate investing. You can start and stop in any phase that you want. We are not judging. We're not here to say one is better than the other. You be you. Phase one takes 5 to 8 years. It's building. Phase two is where you start recycling capital. You get creative. You're not scared anymore. Phase three is where you reach financial freedom and you really have options to do what you want. So I suggest in option three, you plan for it a lot like Anna did. That is a far better way than just waking up one day not working the next day. That was not a good plan on my part, but it's okay.
And especially don't do that now, because we
Yes,
are in a phase in the market where we're very similar to what things looked like in '07
you're right.
before things crashed, when everybody said it's only going to keep getting better. Look at unemployment, look at, all these different things. And
Yeah.
they were kind of in a bubble of not understanding, the economy in general and how they might be impacted if things changed. And now we have some wisdom looking back, 11 years ago and saying, we look awful similar to what we
Oh,
did.
yeah.
So you better be investing very conservatively and not leave your job unless you know you have planned well and that you really can survive, a few months of economic uncertainty.
I am so glad you brought that up, because that's one of the things on Facebook and Instagram that drives me crazy is people with W-2 jobs, maybe done one deal, maybe done two deals. They flash the check and they're like, I just quit. I'm like, oh, are you kidding me? What are you doing? I
Yeah.
mean, I get why that's kind of sexy to do on this social media thing, but it's a long game.
Yeah.
Oh, don't do that.
Right, right. And again, just to drive home the point, a lot of these people that I see that are doing that, they either have a spouse that's working full time and
Mm,
supporting them, so they can have the luxury of kind of saying, I want to pursue this. And maybe they have a 20, $30,000 a year job. Well, if
maybe.
their spouse makes enough for them and they can make 20 or 30,000 a year in real estate, which they can do pretty easily,
Yeah.
sure, quit your job. But it's a whole lot different for someone who has a spouse, who has a family to support,
Yeah.
that has a six-figure income. You can't just up and quit that job. And so I think
No.
sometimes we get caught up in the rah rah 10x, take
Yeah.
control of your life,
Yeah.
and don't really think about what would that look for my life, and is that wise for me to do, given what all of my options and opportunities and risks are. So don't get caught up in hype. Hype can give you some motivation, but don't make decisions based on hype and hope without a plan.
I couldn't say it any better. We're going to leave it at that. Anna, thank you very much for this, and we will talk next week.
Sounds awesome. Y'all have a great week.